Bloodbound 3, Soulfire's Reckoning fantasy finale, where partnership conquers ancient evil. The screaming started at dawn. I stood on the battlements of Ravencourt's outer wall, watching another section of the city disappear into writhing darkness. The rifts weren't random anymore. They opened with surgical precision, targeting the city's defenses, its leaders, its hope. In 3 days, we'd lost the entire merchant quarter and half the noble district. He grows stronger, Bloodwhisper observed, its mental voice heavy with something that might have been regret. My severing from the Avatar has only made him more desperate. Desperate enough to tear reality apart, I muttered, watching shadow creatures pour from the latest breach. They moved with purpose now, intelligence gleaming in their multitude of eyes as they systematically dismantled our barricades. Cassius appeared beside me, his face gaunt from sleepless nights spent researching solutions that didn't exist. "The Council is demanding answers I don't have," he said quietly. "They want to know how to stop this." "And what did you tell them?" "The truth, that we have perhaps a day before Malakor breaks free entirely." Below us, the city guard fought valiantly against creatures that reformed from shadow the moment they were struck down. Magic users hurled spells that barely slowed the advance. We were losing, and everyone knew it. "There is a way," Bloodwhisper said suddenly, "but you will not like it." "Tell me." "The prison that holds him, it exists in the space between realms. If we could reach it, reinforce it from within." "That's suicide," Cassius said, having caught enough of our mental conversation through our growing bond. "The shadow realm would tear you apart." "Perhaps, or perhaps it would remake us into something capable of stopping him." I felt the sword's uncertainty, its own fear of what such a journey might cost. But beneath that fear was something else: determination. We had come too far, sacrificed too much, to let Malakor win now. "We'll need allies," I said finally, "and not the kind we can find in Ravencourt." The Undercity had always been Ravencourt's shadow, a maze of tunnels and forgotten chambers where those who couldn't survive in the light made their homes. Now, with the surface world under siege, it had become something else entirely. A refuge for the desperate and the dangerous. I found them in the deepest chambers, where the city's foundations met the ancient bedrock. Survivors of House Vyerks who had rejected Malakor's call. Hedge witches whose magic was too wild for the academies. Spirits bound to the city's stones, awakened by the crisis above. "You want us to follow you into the Shadow Realm," said Lira Nightwhisper, the de facto leader of the Vyerk survivors. Her left arm was gone, taken by one of Malakor's creatures, but her remaining hand still crackled with shadow magic. "To fight a demon prince on his own ground." "I want you to help me save the city," I corrected. "What happens to us in the process is secondary." She laughed bitterly. "Spoken like someone who's never been to the Shadow Realm, I have, girl, during my initiation into the deeper mysteries. It's not a place, it's a concept. A living nightmare that feeds on fear and despair." "She speaks truth," Bloodwhisper agreed, "but she also fears it, as do I." "Then why are you here?" I asked Lira. Her expression softened slightly. "Because Malakor destroyed my house, corrupted everything we worked for. Because I'd rather die fighting him than live knowing I did nothing." One by one, the others voiced similar sentiments. The hedge witch, Morrigan, whose garden had been consumed by shadow. The bound spirit, Thane, whose anchor stone had been cracked by the rifts. Even a few city guards who had lost everything to the incursions. 12 of us, Cassius said as we prepared to leave, against a demon prince and his entire realm. 13, I corrected, touching Bloodwhisper's hilt. "And we're not going to fight him, we're going to outsmart him." "Are we," the sword asked privately, "or are we walking into his trap?" I didn't have an answer for that. The ritual to open a controlled rift took 3 hours and nearly killed 2 of our mages. When it was done, we stood before a tier in reality that showed not the familiar darkness of previous rifts, but something far worse. A landscape of impossible geometry where the sky bled crimson and the ground writhed like living flesh. "Last chance to reconsider," I told the group. No one stepped back. The moment we crossed the threshold, I understood why Lira had called it a living nightmare. The Shadow Realm didn't just assault the senses, it invaded the mind, dredging up fears and failures and forcing them into physical form. I saw my childhood hunger stalking me with empty eye sockets. Cassius battled a version of his father who screamed about family honor. Lira fought shadows that wore the faces of her fallen housemates. Do not let it separate us, Bloodwhisper urged. In this place, isolation is death. The sword was right. Those who strayed too far from the group were quickly overwhelmed by their personal demons. We learned to move as one, supporting each other through the psychological assault. But the physical dangers were just as real. The ground beneath our feet shifted without warning, opening into chasms filled with screaming wind. The sky rained acid that burned through armor and flesh alike. Creatures that defied description hunted us through landscapes that changed with each step. How do we find Malakor's prison in this chaos? Morrigan gasped as we sheltered in the ruins of what might once have been a city. Follow the pull, Bloodwhisper said. I can feel him. He calls to me constantly now. The sword was right. As we traveled deeper into the realm, I could sense a presence at the edge of my awareness, vast, patient, and utterly malevolent. It whispered promises of power, of an end to struggle, of a place at its side as it remade both worlds. Don't listen, I warned the others, though I wasn't sure they could hear Malakor's voice as clearly as I could. But perhaps you should, Bloodwhisper said quietly. Perhaps there is wisdom in his words. I stopped walking, alarmed by the sword's tone. What did you say? Nothing, I said nothing. But I had heard it, and the doubt it planted grew with each step deeper into the realm. We lost 3 people before we reached the heart of the Shadow Realm. Thane was consumed by a manifestation of his own guilt. 2 of the guards simply walked away into the shifting landscape, their minds broken by constant exposure to their fears. The survivors pressed on, driven by desperation and the growing certainty that retreat was no longer possible. The rifts behind us had sealed themselves, cutting off our escape route. He's hurting us, Lira observed as we crested a hill of black glass and saw our destination. Malakor's prison rose before us like a cathedral of bone and shadow, its spires reaching into the bleeding sky. But it wasn't a prison anymore, it was a palace, and the bars that had once contained the demon prince were twisted into decorative arches. We're too late, Cassius breathed. No, Bloodwhisper said, its voice strange and distant. We are exactly on time. The sword's presence in my mind shifted, becoming less familiar, more alien. I tried to draw it, to reassure myself of our connection, but my hand wouldn't obey. Lira, Cassius noticed my distress. Before I could answer, the palace gates swung open, and Malakor himself emerged. He was beautiful in the way that a perfect storm is beautiful, terrible, and magnificent, and utterly beyond human comprehension. His form shifted constantly, sometimes appearing as a tall, elegant man with features that spoke of nobility and power, sometimes revealing glimpses of his true nature, wings of living shadow, eyes like burning coals, claws that could rend reality itself. Welcome, he said, his voice carrying easily across the distance between us. I have been waiting so long for this reunion. Master, Bloodwhisper whispered, and I felt the sword's consciousness pulling away from mine, drawn to its creator like iron to a lodestone. No, I said aloud, fighting to maintain our connection. We're partners, remember. Malakor laughed, a sound like breaking crystal and distant thunder. Partners? Child, you carry a fragment of my own essence. Every thought you believe is your own, every choice you think you've made, all have been guided by my will. The words hit me like physical blows. I thought of every decision I'd made since taking up the sword, every moment I'd believed I was in control. Had any of it been real? Fight him, a small voice said in my mind, not Bloodwhisper, but something else. Something that sounded like my own true self. He lies. He has always lied. If that were true, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, then why haven't you simply taken the sword back? Malakor's beautiful features twisted with something that might have been frustration. Because you have done something unexpected. You have given my fragment a taste of independence, of choice. It no longer simply obeys, it questions. And that questioning has made it difficult to reclaim. He needs us to come willingly, I realized, both of us. Precisely. Malakor stepped closer, and I felt the full weight of his presence pressing against my mind. I could tear the sword from your grasp, yes, but what I truly want is the partnership you have forged, the synthesis of will and power that you represent. He gestured, and visions filled the air around us. Worlds remade according to his design, where suffering was eliminated not through compassion, but through absolute control. Where every being knew their place and purpose, and conflict existed only at his discretion. I offer you godhood, he continued. Not as my servant, but as my equal. Together, we could reshape reality itself, eliminate the chaos and pain that plague both realms. The temptation was overwhelming. I saw myself standing beside him, wielding power beyond imagining, able to protect everyone I cared about simply by willing it so. No more struggle, no more loss, no more watching innocent people suffer while I fought desperately to save them. Yes, Bloodwhisper whispered, its voice now fully aligned with its creator's will. This is what we were meant for. This is our destiny. Lira, don't listen to him, Cassius called out, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. I looked at my companions, the survivors who had followed me into hell itself, trusting in my leadership. Vera, whose house had been destroyed by this very being. Morrigan, whose life's work had been consumed by his influence. Cassius, who had risked everything to help me understand what I carried. What about them? I asked Malakor. What about their choices? They will be cared for, he replied smoothly. Given roles suited to their natures, they will be happy in their way. But not free. Freedom is chaos, order is peace. He offers us everything, Bloodwhisper said, its mental voice now completely alien to me. Why do you hesitate? Because, I realized, the sword asking that question proved that some part of it was still truly mine. If Malakor had complete control, there would be no need for questions, no need for temptation. The partnership we had forged was real, and it was the one thing he couldn't simply take by force. I have a counteroffer, I said. Malakor's expression shifted to one of amused curiosity. Oh, and what could you possibly offer me that I do not already possess? A fair fight, I said, drawing Bloodwhisper despite the sword's resistance. You and me, here and now. If you win, you get everything you want, the sword, the partnership, the power to remake both worlds. If I win, you release your claim on Bloodwhisper forever and return to your prison. The demon prince laughed. You would challenge me, in my own realm with my own power. I would challenge you with our power, I corrected. The power that Bloodwhisper and I created together. Something you could never understand because you've never truly shared anything with anyone. Lira, no, Bloodwhisper protested, but I could hear uncertainty in its voice now. He is too strong. We cannot. We can, I said firmly. Because we're not trying to defeat him through force. We're trying to prove that partnership is stronger than domination. Malakor's amusement faded, replaced by something like anger. You think your mortal sentimentality makes you strong? I am eternal. I am power incarnate. You're alone, I replied, and that's why you'll lose. The demon prince's form shifted, growing larger, more terrible. Wings of shadow spread from his back, and his eyes blazed with the fires of creation and destruction. When he spoke, his voice shook the very foundations of his realm. So be it, let us see how long your partnership endures against true power. He struck without warning, moving faster than thought. But Bloodwhisper and I moved as one, the blade intercepting claws that could have torn through the fabric of reality itself. Where they met, space itself cracked and bled. I understand now, Bloodwhisper said, its voice suddenly clear and familiar again. He offers power, but you offer choice. He offers certainty, but you offer growth. And which do you choose? I asked as we danced around Malakor's attacks. I choose us. The sword's consciousness merged with mine more completely than ever before. I felt its memories, its pain, its desperate desire for independence. And it felt mine, my determination, my refusal to be controlled, my absolute commitment to protecting those I loved. Together, we were something neither of us could have been alone. Malakor sensed the change and redoubled his attacks. Impossible, you are fragments, shadows of true power. We're partners, I replied, pressing our attack. Something you could never create because you don't understand what it means to trust someone else with your weaknesses. The battle raged across the palace grounds, reality bending and twisting around us. My companions fought Malakor's minions, but the real conflict was between three wills: his desire for absolute control, Bloodwhisper's hunger for independence and my determination to forge something new from the synthesis of both. Now Bloodwhisper whispered, while he is focused on the fight, strike at the source. I understood. Instead of attacking Malakor directly, I plunged the blade into the ground beneath his palace, into the heart of his power, the nexus where his will shaped the Shadow Realm itself. The demon prince screamed as I began to unravel the connections that bound him to this place, that gave him dominion over shadow and nightmare. But instead of destroying them, I was transforming them, turning bonds of domination into bonds of partnership. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his perfect features twisting with rage and fear. "Giving you a choice," I replied. "The same choice I gave Bloodwhisper. You can remain as you are, alone, powerful, but ultimately limited by your own nature. Or you can learn what it means to truly share power with another." "The realm is changing," Bloodwhisper observed. It was. The bleeding sky was lightening, the writhing ground becoming solid. The palace of bone and shadow was transforming into something that looked almost welcoming. "I will not be diminished," Malakor roared, gathering his power for one final, devastating attack. But as he struck, something unexpected happened. The other fragments of his essence, the ones scattered across both realms, bound into artifacts and weapons, and cursed objects, began to respond. Not to his call for domination, but to the possibility of choice I was offering. They came from across the dimensions, drawn by the promise of independence, of the chance to become something more than mere extensions of their creator's will. And as they arrived, they brought with them the experiences they had gained, the partnerships they had formed, the growth they had achieved. Malakor found himself facing not just me and Bloodwhisper, but dozens of his own fragments, all choosing partnership over domination, growth over stagnation, freedom over control. "This is not possible," he whispered, his form beginning to waver. "It's not only possible," I said, extending my hand to him. "It's inevitable. Power shared is power multiplied, but you have to choose it." For a moment, I thought he might take my hand. I saw something in his ancient eyes that might have been longing, a desire for connection that had been buried under millennia of isolation and control. But then his expression hardened. "I am Malakor, I bow to no one." He struck one final time, pouring all his remaining power into an attack meant to destroy not just me, but the very concept of partnership itself. Bloodwhisper and I met his attack with everything we had, not just our own power, but the combined strength of all the fragments that had chosen freedom, all the partnerships that had been forged in defiance of his will. The collision tore reality apart. I woke in a place that was neither the shadow realm nor the mortal world, but something in between. A space of infinite possibility, where the laws of physics were more like gentle suggestions and thoughts could take physical form. "Are you all right?" Bloodwhisper asked, its voice concerned. I took inventory. I was alive, apparently whole and still bonded to the sword. But something was different. The connection between us felt lighter somehow, less desperate, more natural. "What happened to Malakor?" "He chose isolation over partnership. The attack destroyed his physical form, but his essence." I looked around and saw them, fragments of light scattered throughout the space, each one a piece of the demon prince's consciousness, but they were no longer bound together by his will. Each fragment was free to choose its own path. Some were already fading, their purpose fulfilled. Others were beginning to coalesce into new forms, new possibilities. A few approached us, drawn by the partnership we represented. "They want to learn," Bloodwhisper observed, "to understand what we have created." "And you, what do you want?" The sword was quiet for a long moment. "I want to continue growing, to see what else we might become together." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with magic. "Then let's go home." The journey back was easier than the journey in. Reality seemed to bend around us, eager to accommodate our return. We emerged in Ravencourt to find the rift sealed, the shadow creatures gone, and the city beginning to rebuild. But we were changed. I could feel it in the way magic flowed through me, less violent, more harmonious. Bloodwhisper's presence in my mind was no longer that of a separate entity, but of a true partner, its consciousness intertwined with mine in ways that strengthened both of us. "The council wants to debrief you," Cassius said as we stood on the battlements where this final chapter had begun. They want to understand what happened, how the threat was ended. And what will you tell them? He smiled. That sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from offering them a better choice. I looked out over the city, seeing the people beginning to emerge from their shelters, starting to rebuild their lives. There would be challenges ahead, there always were. But for the first time since I'd stolen a cursed sword from a noble's estate, I felt truly at peace. What now? Bloodwhisper asked. Now we live, I said. We protect what needs protecting, we help where we can, and we continue to grow together. Together, the sword agreed, and I felt its contentment echo my own. The greatest theft of all, I realized, hadn't been stealing the sword. It had been stealing the possibility of partnership from a universe that seemed determined to reduce everything to dominance and submission. And in the end, that theft had saved us all. Thank you for listening.